Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for a bit of a lateness. My name is Geoff Yaw. I am a local director-producer, primarily of documentaries. I'm going to moderate this panel this afternoon, and without any further ado, I'm going to get the panelists up here on stage. Please welcome to the stage Anthony Sherin, director of the short Witch Hunt, Jaime Sunwoo, who is the director of the short Handwritten, Kasick, who is the director of the film Sleuth, and then also welcome to the stage last-minute joiners Tommy, Merrick, and Will, who are here representing the film 18 Tuesdays. We have one working mic, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to be down here and I'm going to sort of hand the mic to folks. I'm going to start here on the end with Anthony, and I'm going to do something that sort of assumes that the viewing audience and the parts of the audience in here have not seen these films. If you could do the thing that all documentary filmmakers do so well, which is give us your nutshell. I just met you at a dinner party, and explain to me what it is that your film is about.
So my film is about the Hollywood blacklist, and the character is J. Edward Bromberg, who was blacklisted, very famous theater actor. And he was a very famous character actor in Hollywood, and the story is told by his son, who's now 91, Conrad Bromberg.
Hey, I'm Kasick. I just wanted to thank Sheridan Documentary Film Festival. This is a great event. I've attended it in the past, and these kind of filmmakers, film festivals are super important to documentary film, especially like regional sort of filmmaking. So my name's Kasick. I made a film in Marietta, Parkersburg, Ohio. I'm from Cleveland. It's a feature documentary called Sleuth, where I followed a young woman as she was doing a true crime podcast in real time, and it became one of the biggest podcasts in the world. And I had a lot of questions, and it's sort of about the collision of entertainment and facts. And it's called Sleuth, and it's Friday at 7 and Saturday at 4. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jaime Sunwoo, and I made an animated short doc with puppetry about handwriting. It's called Handwritten. It's screened today, just before this event, and it's screening tomorrow at 9 a.m., I believe at St. Joan of Arc, and then 2 p.m. on Saturday at Valley Arts Center, and it's part of like an inspiration of art. That inspiration of art is like the title of that short block. So you can catch it there. And yeah, it's kind of inspired by the fact that I don't have consistent handwriting. And so I just scanned a bunch of my childhood writings and writings till now, and made these like textured paper puppets. And it's really like a personal essay on handwriting and what it means to people now and what it means to people before. Now that everything's so computerized, it's just a nice reflection.
Hello, my name is Merrick. Me, Tommy, and Will are the creators, and Will is our sound guy. He helped tremendously. We created a bike ride last year in Cleveland that was meant to bring people together in a way that wasn't necessarily going out to a bar or, traditional ways of meeting new people. And so we would set up these rides once a week, and we tow around a bike trailer full of speakers, and we'd go to just random places that people weren't expecting. No one knew where we were going at all the whole time. And we would throw a party. And Tommy was filming most of the time, and we didn't really know what we were going to do with the film. And at the end, we said, let's make a documentary. And so we're fortunate enough to be here.
When is it being shown?
It's going to be shown tonight at 5:30 across the street at the park.
Are you bringing the sound system?
They brought the sound system
Hell yeah.
for us.
Hell yeah, as it should be. I am certain that everybody in this room has questions for these folks. I do a little bit of housekeeping. I've been made aware that at 2:20 this afternoon, there's some sort of emergency broadcast system that's going to make all of your phones explode. Yeah. Just know that we all know that that's going to happen, and when it happens, what's that? Oh. Okay, I stand corrected. It's a national alert. Just know that it's going to happen. Let's try not to be freaked out about it. Before we get to questions from the audience, I had the pleasure of talking to some of these folks beforehand, and I have a couple of questions about you. What you see here on this panel is a really diverse swath of styles of filmmaking. And I'll start with Jaime. You described the art in your short as puppetry. As I watch it, I receive it as they look almost like paper cutouts to me. It's really cool looking stuff. It's really unusual. Can you talk about how the art for your film was created?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I scanned real entries from past writings, and so I use those as the textures for a lot of these paper puppets. I also just, for some of them, I actually just wrote for those, and I also just hand illustrated a lot of it. So, and everything, I just kept it in a sort of a grayscale using like black and white and gray cardstock paper, very, very simple tools, and the whole film happens, I guess, inside a sketchbook kind of thing. Like you open it up and you zoom into this like world of paper. And so that was very fun, and it's interesting to work in this, I guess, like puppetry's sort of the grandfather of animation is how I see it. But it's interesting to work in this way for a documentary because the whole thing is fully scripted and storyboarded way before, right? So it's really cool just to see it in a shorts block with filmmakers that shared footage in the field, and it's because this is a very different type of way of storytelling. And as far as like puppetry goes, this is actually part of a puppet shorts collection, executive produced by Heather Henson, who is the daughter of Jim and Jane Henson. And so you can go on Amazon Prime Video and just look up like Fantastic Worlds, and there's like a series of different shorts by different puppet artists. My short is just one of them, and you can catch it there as well.
Awesome, thank you. Chris Kasick has a film called Citizen Sleuth that is, in my estimation, one of the more difficult kinds of documentaries to make. Not that any of it is easy, it's all difficult. Chris may disagree with this, it's sort of an investigative piece of journalism, is what it strikes me as. In fact, if you look at the clip that's up on the film festival, it literally portrays a moment where a police officer is actively angry at Chris's main character, and probably in so doing also mad at Chris in that moment as well, a little bit. It's one, I'm fascinated with the process of documentary filmmaking. And Chris, I'm wondering if you can step us through some of the more challenging moments when you're dealing with people who you actively have made angry in the process of making a film.
Making people angry is sort of, I'm good at it. And my favorite kind of documentaries are these small, intimate stories that have are about larger things. And if you can tell a story about a larger, bigger idea through personal choices and access in filmmaking, that's my favorite kind of thing. And so when I made Citizen Sleuth, I had befriended Emily Nestor, who's the main character in this. And as we were going through this, we faced a lot of obstacles. The police, the truth, a lot of things were standing in the way. And I developed a trust that we were out for a higher mission here, that we were out for setting the record straight and telling the truth. And if you can find a character in a documentary who's in an active conflict, and they allow you to go along the journey with them, that's, wow.
There we go.
That.
I guess I was going to get warned.
So,
That cop is still pissed at you.
yeah, they're all. And so I guess my approach to facing difficult stuff is not being afraid as a filmmaker and believing in the higher purpose of it. This film wasn't casual. It was 5 years of my life, full time, all the time, all my money in it, all my relationships fell aside to this film. I really believe in this, and when you believe in something bigger, I mean, that's what I do for a living, and that's what I care about, so that's my
Thanks, man. Anthony, who's on the end, has a film called Witch Hunt that is a historical short. And in talking to Anthony, his process for creating this film is, by the way, you guys, kudos for having your sound guy with you, because that's 50% of the show, and it's something that people will usually forget about, so good on you for that. And it actually speaks to how Anthony created his film, and I'll let him tell you his story.
So, you know, we live in a very contentious time, and I always thought that the Hollywood blacklist and McCarthyism was one of the most frightening moments in our history, or recent history, and then all of a sudden, you know, we're in a frightening time right now. So I read this famous book called Naming Names about the Hollywood blacklist, and the most interesting interviewee is a man named Conrad Bromberg. And I found him living fairly close to me, and he was very eager to be in the film, contacted him, and this was during the pandemic, and he's 91, or during the pandemic, before the vaccination. So I went to his house, and I recorded an audio track. I went there twice, so a very extensive audio track. So I would, set up a microphone, situate him. I was outside, and I recorded the highest quality audio track. And then, from that, hours of that, I created, kind of a perfect, seamless narration of the story. So that was the base, I started to work from. And it's a lot of archival footage, Hollywood footage. I tried many different things. At first I thought I would photograph him, kind of telling his story from outside through a door. But later, I did traditional filming, or great shots, but not with him talking, but just doing things, that related to the story.
Yeah, that's a technique that I don't think many people would consider, is the starting with the audio first and then figuring out what we're going to see later. I think that's really brave and brilliant. But when you said that to me, I was like, wow, I've never considered that would be anybody's process. It's very cool. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. Merrick, Will, and Tommy, I'll pose this question before I get to questions from the audience. I think that everybody on the stage probably has a different story about why they decided to make the movie that they made. There's a decision that we all make, and I think everybody on the stage, it might not be their first rodeo. Now, is it your first films?
First finished film.
Okay, Jamie. Jamie, your first, or
It's my second.
your second? Okay. These two guys, I know it's not their first rodeo. People who have done this before realize that it's a big investment of time. Chris just described you what that investment of time was in terms of his film, 5 years of his life. That's not unusual. Look at him, he looks tired.
No,
Just kidding. So y'all's your first this rodeo. When was the moment you were like, guys, we gotta make a movie out of this? I'll get this mic up. Yeah, just give it to the group, whoever wants to grab it.
So I'm in a band also, and I for years would document our shows and traveling and all that. So I had the archival thing down, I have it all separated by year. So when we started the bike rides, I was just shooting for no particular reason. And then we called it 18 Tuesdays because we did 18 consecutive weeks. And at the end of it, we're just like, what should we do with this? Make like a recap video to kind of just, share what we did. And Merrick was like, we should go a little deeper and actually kind of, sit down and mic ourselves up and like do some testimonials on it and then turn it into a full thing. And, really the idea of this community that we built throughout the bike, night was not planned at all. We didn't set out to make the doc, and so it was exciting in that way. As far as the sound too, we obviously weren't miking up like on the rides and stuff. So when we brought Will in for post, like he really had a lot to
He was mad at
chisel away at. Yeah.
He was pissed. Yeah, let's say.
Yeah.
No, he kept it calm the whole time.
Yeah. And is there anything you want to say about like?
Yeah, so Excuse the nerves, people don't talk to the sound department that often. So I work specifically in post-production audio, which there's the one side, which is like the glitz and glamour of recording Foley and making sound design and helicopters and gunshots and laser beams and stuff. And then there's the other side, which is almost a sort of archaeology.
When dudes forget to bring mics to set?
And I think it's especially pertinent to documentary filmmaking now more than ever, because every single person has a camera and a microphone in their pocket, and everybody has cool stories to tell. So now more than ever, you're seeing mixed frame rates and weird sample rates and, you know, crazy sound. And in some cases, you get a big party that's on a moving bicycle with music in the background that's taking place under a bridge with everybody shouting and fireworks popping off. So I like the idea of what I do for documentaries is, in the most literal sense, making sure people have their voices heard. Because the last thing I would want for these guys when they're going out of their way and doing all these great interviews with people who haven't really been interviewed before is, if they get something really good, I don't want to be the one to tell them, like, oh, that's not usable, oh, it sounds terrible, whatever. So it was really cool to try and bring everything out of that, make sure everything sounded super sick. And now tonight's the real test of how good does it sound next to a waterfall outdoors. So that'll be really interesting, but it was a pleasure working with these guys. It was really cool getting to come in at the end and put a whole summer into 2 weeks of mixing.
Where are you guys from?
Cleveland
Oh, you
Heights.
guys are Cleveland, you guys are
He's
Cleveland.
LA now.
Yeah.
New stuff.
Awesome. Y'all probably sick of me and hearing my questions. Who has questions for this panel? Anybody? Awesome.
Jaime, I'm curious, puppetry crosses so many molds, and even just considering a documentary, I don't know if you knew going into it, was this a documentary in your mind, or did you have specific styles of puppetry that inspired this, or does that cross different lines of, I guess I'm curious the background of puppetry that went into this.
Yeah, so before the pandemic, I had done a lot of stage work, and the Henson Foundation, the first time I wasn't doing anything with Henson-related stuff, they had funded my shadow puppetry and handheld puppetry for this now filmed play that I'm hoping to share that centers around Spam the Can Meat and the history of the Korean War and World War II. And so all of that puppetry was supported, and then the pandemic hit, and of course it was very challenging to do stage work. And so Heather Henson's company, Green Feather Foundation, they were looking for puppet artists that had were generally new to filmmaking, who had maybe done a lot of work for stage, but not for film. And so she put together a cohort, and we basically got filmmaking 101 sort of guidance, and then a collection of the shorts that were produced by that cohort were later, we were basically selected to share more broadly. As far as using puppetry for a documentary, so that stage show, it's a filmed play, and it's a very surreal show, but all the facts are real. So it was very autobiographical, historical, and so I feel like even in my works in other mediums, it's been very research inspired. And then I had another commission from Park Avenue Armory, and that was supposed to be a live work, and it was smack dab 2020 summer pre-vax. So they said all the artists had to submit digital work, and I was thinking, initially it was supposed to be a live tea party, sort of immersive live thing, and then I thought, okay, and that commission was for the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which was all about women's suffrage movement, voting rights. So I had made this film, which I'm now trying to share more broadly as well, called Equality Tea. And I had done a ton of research for it, and I thought, you know, I don't really want to do like a Zoom documentation of a live theater piece or something. Like, I should just, if it's going to be a video, I'll make it a film, and instead of having actors, I'll print out my actors. So that's how the paper puppetry started, because, and that film, so the Handwritten one, it's tabletop, so it's, the camera's overhead, and everything feels quite like flat. And for Equality Tea, I had shot it frontal, and it was a mix of paper puppets and mostly from like archival photos, so of like different suffragists throughout history, things like that, and also tea sets. So it was like a mix of object and paper, and that was because it was kind of exploring parallels between the tea trade and the suffrage movement. So yeah, it was all very organic. I didn't really think about it. I just thought like, oh, it was a mix of like finding creative solutions, because of course for Equality Tea, I created both Handwritten and Equality Tea from home with a very, very limited team. Like for Equality Tea, it was entirely me and just my composer who did the soundtrack remotely. And then for this one, I luckily had a team of just like assistants and a few collaborators for the visuals, but it was still mostly me, and then that composer, the same composer as well.
Thank you.
I have a question for Merrick. In doing this kind of really on-the-spot filmmaking, did you ever have anybody who said, "Get the heck out of here," you know, or get angry that you were doing it?
For the rides?
Yes.
During the rides?
Yeah.
Surprisingly, we caught no flack the whole time.
Yeah.
And we were, I wouldn't say pushing the limits, but we were in places a lot of time we weren't really supposed to be. And shooting off fireworks, and you know, we had 60 people show up a good deal of times, so we had no, and you know, we're right in the middle of the streets, and no one had any issue.
You were lucky.
I think because we just were having a good time and people could understand that. So anytime we interacted with people on the street or police, they could just see that everyone was in such good spirit that they just didn't want to mess with it.
I think when you see 60 smiling faces, you just assume they're where they need to be, you know?
So everybody was very happy that you were doing a documentary.
Yeah.
No one knew. That was the other
People
thing.
there didn't really know because we kind of were doing it in discreet ways.
Oh,
Yeah.
So
you
we
didn't have to
surprised-
ask permission or anything, you just.
We
Yeah.
we did ask permission like toward the end when we were.
You guys know she's a lawyer, right?
For the record, yeah, we asked for permission toward the end, but like, yeah, no one was, you know, opposed to being featured, and yeah, it kind of helped with the natural reaction from people to not like have it on the gimbal like the whole time and stuff. We kind of kept it like discreet. Yeah.
Yeah, so everyone was genuinely like themselves on camera. No one was like, oh, this is going to be online or anything like that. So we captured the most genuine state of everyone just being in a good place. So it was pretty cool.
Sorry, I'm now remembering that we need to use this microphone because they're also recording this.
Oh.
Sorry, sound person who's going to put this together later.
Okay.
My apologies. Who else has a question for these folks? I'll come to you. Yeah, sorry, we should use the mic. I'm going to get in trouble if we don't.
I just wanted to know a little bit about the editing process for all the projects, like how much information you had to discard, how much time it took to, I mean, you said 5 years, so that's a lot of content, I would imagine.
That is.
And it's a short film, you're saying too, so it's like,
No, it's a feature.
oh, sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, just talking about the editing process and about like how much,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, my film's 82 minutes. We have over 500 hours of audio and footage that was captured over 5 years, and it wasn't obvious what the story was. And you know, the best documentaries, you go in with an idea and you start like connecting dots. But if it can go in another way, you go with it, because that's like how life is and that's how stories go. And like stories take turns and you go with it. And I've been a part of, you know, other big productions that can't do that. They're not mobile enough where they can do. These guys sound like they can do it. But you know, you follow a story and you go with it. And so it wasn't obvious what my movie was about while I was making it. I actually thought it was about something else. And about halfway through production, I was like, well, I know I have some good stuff. And so I was like, who's the best editors in documentary? And Jeff Gilbert, he edited The Overnighters and Boys State, and I met with him halfway through the process, and he's like, listen, man, I'm like booked out for a year in advance, so you got to get me like going. And so that like, pushed me. So I got him on board, and it was a year until he came and started starting the process. And again, it wasn't like a casual, we're just gonna like start editing. Like we watched all the footage, and then we have like footage logs, and then we wrote a screenplay basically off of the documentary footage. Not like lines, but like we connected all the dots into a giant document of a beat sheet of this is what the story is over 3 arcs. And then it took a year to edit full time. And so we finished in March for South by Southwest, and we're showing it locally now. So this is like, part of the local swing of showing it in the region sort of where it happened. So it wasn't a casual effort.
Yeah, it's, my film is 31 minutes, and it seemed to take forever to make. Probably 3 years, which kind of stuns me. It's not as if I haven't done it. I think I can maybe do it in 9 months or a year, and it's always twice as long and twice as long again. And the process was creating this audio track, which for me makes perfect sense because I don't have to deal with picture. I don't think about it, and so syntax is perfect. The story is perfect. I already mentioned that. And then I started getting archival footage. And really interesting, during the pandemic, I found ways to do it online. It's download high quality archival footage. That's months of work. And I used a lot of Hollywood footage, which was very difficult to get. It was like technically difficult, but I was able to do that. So it's hard, painful, but also exhilarating.
You sort of naturally dovetailed into something that I would consider to be flexibility of vision. I know Jaime described that she's working from a fully scripted and storyboarded, sort of laying out before you begin the production process, which is sort of unique to documentaries. That's something that's kind of rare. Chris, I'm going to return to you because you sort of described a situation where you thought your movie was about one thing and it turned out to be something else, which really describes the flexibility of vision, and I think probably part of what you guys are doing as well. But I want you to talk about what it takes to pivot and the confidence that it takes to pivot in a moment like that where you're like, I thought I was making this thing, but it's becoming something else. Describe as much, for folks that haven't seen the movie without giving away too many spoilers, describe what that was like to confront that.
Yeah, there's a moment in my film where it's like everything flips, like a little bit like a Sixth Sense kind of thing at the end. And when we were confronted with that during production, it was a scary kind of proposition because there's money being spent, you have a crew there, and you're like, oh my gosh, like what we're making this movie about is not what I thought this was about. But that's when it opens possibilities, and that's when films can become, better. And you start dealing with larger ideas in movies, is when things, they transform from the scene in front of you into something larger. And so often people will stick to the script and just do it and do a couple of interviews, connect the dots, and there you go. But if you put yourself out there and you try to change and you try to go with a story, it's not like, oh, I'm pivoting right now. It's like, well, that's interesting and that's connected to this. Oh, that's interesting. But the main thing is conflict, is like two characters trying to work something out on camera. And if you have conflict throughout and a bigger idea, you can probably connect those dots later in post. But again, not an obvious thing, and post is everything in connecting those dots with pivots.
What is your criteria for, when you're making something like that, you're often confronted with ideas and things that are emerging.
Yeah.
And some of them lead you someplace, and some of them bear no fruit whatsoever.
Yeah.
What is your personal criteria for what you follow and what you don't?
I mean, I was following a main character as there were obstacles that were coming up in her life, and there was a storyline that we followed for a year that literally turned into nothing, and it's not even in the movie. But at the time, I thought that was going to like connect all these dots. But each little thing leads you to something else, and so especially locations and this and that. And like when I look at my film now, in the end, like I see scenes that were never meant to be what they were meant. Because I think of scenes, I think of scene work. I don't think of interviews. I don't think I got to do a sit-down interview. Like I think of like I need something to happen in this room right now with my main character, and like I'm gonna shoot like film at verite kind of thing. And so I think of blocks of when I'm filming. And so I'm trying to pivot scenes, and if like something happens in this scene and the character says something, I'll like connect with that character and try to build upon it.
Is there anybody else on stage that had a similar experience where you thought what you were making was one thing, and at the end of the day, it was something else entirely?
Yeah. I mean, definitely, like, it was one of those things where we were putting in, like, I think 12-hour days, and then chipping away at all the footage we had. You have all the footage sitting there, and then you start to uncover, like you said, Chris, the connecting plots, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, that leads into this, and then the narrative starts to build itself, which was really cool to watch happen, and it kind of, like, was addicting in a way where you're like, oh, we can do a couple more hours, you know, and then, like, the sun's coming up, and we're like, all right, let's pick up tomorrow on this, you know. But, yeah, it was really cool watching that unfold, and it was just exciting.
I've been working on another film for about 5 years now as well, and I just went in with the intent. I befriended a woman about 10 years ago, and as we started to have our friendship, she was 94, and she started to tell me about her history, and I realized that this was such precious information that I needed to start just capturing this, and didn't really know what the end-all result was going to be, but I realized that everything was time sensitive and that the story would come later. And so the whole process is still working like that, where I'm finding it as I go. And so it's an experience.
Yeah. I was confronted with what's the beginning, what's the ending. I can devise, a sequence that I really like, and I realize it doesn't work. So, it's creating tension, conflict, fascinating material, ideas I think people don't know about. Those are they're endless solutions, the problems that have to be solved.
I can keep talking.
Questions? Yeah, go ahead. I think it's okay. Just project.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Being in film, I think two aspects that are highly important that I think is good to address in more depth, and that's time and also money, because you need more money if you're going to spend more time for a longer production. And that seems to be always a challenge. It depends, unless you contract with some organization that says, here, we'd like to do this. So I've seen people that do documentaries more than narratives. They do take longer. They take, because you want that perfect film. You want it to emanate everything that you're feeling and what you believe in relationship to what the subject matter is. And at least that's how I feel. So consequently, like, well, what if we just did this? Or, oh, what I saw on here. And then, like you were saying, it expounds, and then the next thing you know, it's another year and another year. And it's still not out there, which your goal is to get it out there, to have everyone experience what you feel. So I just wanted you to address that in relationship to having the thought, I've got to get this done. Or I want to get in festivals, or I want to finish it for whatever reasons. Working in other mediums like television, it's got to be done, or even a narrative film.
Yeah.
You got to finish it in a timeline. So I just wanted you to address that in relationship to that, and then the more realistic aspect of you need more funds if you're going to go longer. Like I think you said, you had to have another crew or longer. So
The question is about time and money and balancing time and money. And
Yes.
for me, I've done like studio type documentaries and kind of projects where it's a very like, this is the budget, this is the time, and you do it, and you go out and you make those things. But when you're doing an independently produced project, which I wanted to make Citizen Sleuth as an independent thing because I knew that I needed time, that I needed, for me, I'm at a point in my career where I'm tired of explaining about the projects I work on. Like, this is my project and this. Like, I want to say Tiger King, and everybody knows. And so I was going to go and you go at a certain, I mean, I live in Los Angeles, I work in the entertainment business, I have for 20 some years, but you go for a certain point and you want that signature work. And this may be bad advice, but time and money didn't matter to me, where I knew my material was strong enough where I could get more money and time if I showed it to people. And it wasn't until I had the project done and through screenings and input and a sales agent on board, and everyone's like, yes, this is ready to go to festivals. If you push it to festivals and you're not getting into festivals and this and that, maybe your film's not ready for festivals, but it matters what you want. Like, if you're just making something like it's a hobby in the background, that's fine and that's cool, but like everything, like my whole life revolves around this, and so I have to make it like time and money. With an independent project, it had to be good on this. So it's a loose answer to that, but it depends on the project. And for this one, it was an independent thing, and I knew I needed to make it as good as I can. And so that's why I made it the way I did it.
Anybody else want to address that?
Time and money.
Yeah, I mean, my perspective is slightly different as somebody below the line and not directly the filmmaker, but
That sounds so harsh when you don't know what it means.
below the line meaning I'm not giving the money, I'm in fact taking the money. But the thing about edit, especially in documentaries, is that the edit's your baby and it's never done. I think so long as you're making the film and the film exists or you've even made the film, there's always that one extra thing that you wish you did, or, oh, you'd love to try that. Oh, I wish I connected those things. Unfortunately, in post-audio, the first thing that I get to say to filmmakers when we work together is your picture locked? You need to lock your picture. I can't work until the picture is locked. Please lock your picture, please. And I think it's a delicate balance because I think everybody who works on every film it's in their best interest that it's as good as it can possibly be, and it's perfect in every way because that's a reflection of everybody who worked on it. But at a certain point, you just have to let it fly and appreciate that, like, even if future you has ideas, like, the ideas that past or present you had are equally valid and they're really cool. So I think it's a function of appreciating what you've done as an individual voice, kind of. That makes sense.
Yeah, too, and just to that point, like, for our film particularly, we had the source material. It was 18 Tuesdays, and when that 18 Tuesdays was over, it was kind of locked, So I think we had that advantage of our stuff was there, and there was no more material. So but knowing when to call it a day is also like.
Did you guys preordain that it was going to be 18? Before it was a movie, what you guys were doing was just throwing cool parties in the street and buying some speakers.
Yeah, so no, there was no like, it's going to end on 18, it just happened to be that way, and yeah.
It became of age, you could vote, and you were like, yeah, we're done.
Yeah,
Cool.
19 doesn't
Questions? More questions? Yeah, come on.
Kind of a follow with the time and money and with the editorial process with time in general. Is everybody here full-time filmmakers, or do you do something else that fills in time and money?
Go down the line. We'll just do it.
Yes, I'm full-time. I make money editing films.
I'm a full-time filmmaker, and yeah, I make TV, I have TV shows going, and then films, and I also direct advertising with real people, kind of advertising.
Yeah, I would say art making, all sorts of mediums. I do want to pivot more strongly in film. and I'm doing freelance animation as well.
I do every job under the sun to pay the bills and keep the artistic drive going. So film is a passion, and I would like to get to a point where I can have it be my full-time, but you know, you got to figure out how to make it work where I'm at right now. So yeah.
I work in post-production full-time.
You take the money, yeah, we know.
That sounds bad.
I'm a musician, and so I kind of balance the time between music and film. But I just moved to Los Angeles 6 months ago, so I've been doing stuff up
So
there.
you need one.
Yes.
Something that I think is always really good fodder for things like this. I mean, I think we all sort of, ideas come to us at all times, especially when we're filmmakers. And I think there's, you know, and also there's that thing where people in our lives bring us ideas that they think are amazing ideas. Sometimes they are, sometimes they are not. They're usually not. No offense to our families. You know, I would love to hear from each of you sort of, you know, when this film that we're here talking about today became a thing that you had to do. You know, I think there's usually, it's a very cinematic way to put it, and maybe it isn't exactly like that for you, but when and how did you decide that you were going to embark on this journey?
It's a difficult question. I think that making the commitment to do it is huge and very hard. I did that early on, but there was constant triage and changing. So, you know, I don't know if I can be more specific than that, but, you know, it just continually working on it, figuring out the story.
Well, you said earlier, Anthony, that you read an interview in a book and that sort of inspired you to scratch the itch.
Yes.
But that's the beginning of it.
That's the beginning, but that's not really the commitment to do it.
Yeah.
So the commitment to do it was meeting my subject and finding him really endlessly fascinating. You know, he's 91 and his memory, it was just astounding. And his personal pain, I mean, his father died during this. I mean, there's a character in the film who was blacklisted in 1950, and he didn't work again until 1978, Kramer versus Kramer. So he went from High Noon, classic film, to, you know, it's a lifetime.
I had to make the movie. I found it in the summer of 2019, listened to a true crime podcast, and I found out there were innocent people implicated in the murder of a girl in 2019, and publicly their names were still tied to this murder, and I went on an odyssey to sort of set the record straight and to do my own investigation, and I got caught up and I got in too deep, and it's all in the movie, so you'll be able to see it.
But hang on, before we move on. That's not, that's sort of, so there's just something inside of you where you're like,
Well, you start becoming financially like involved in it too.
No, that's right about
So, but
that.
but that's a real situation,
Yeah.
because when you start spending like significant amounts of money like on something, you need
Yeah.
to see that through too. But yeah, but you only, I mean, most people don't put up their personal finances in for movies like that, and so you start caring about it
Yeah.
very passionately about what your cause is.
I'm not talking
right?
about money. You just glossed over this and you were like, I heard this story. It's like, what is it inside of you? You're like, oh, I have to pursue this.
So I heard a podcast in 2019 called Mile Marker 181, and it was about the death of Julia Davis in Marietta, Ohio. And I went to Ohio University, and so I knew the area. I knew Appalachia. I mean, not like I'm an expert, but I lived there for like 4 years or something like that. And so it spoke to me that like I could be a part of that community because I was. And so it felt like a story I could tell. And so when I got there and sort of became part of the community, there started becoming personal stakes involved in it with me, where I had personal relationships now, and I cared about the people who were in my movie. And like, it's a shit stir, this movie. And so like, you care about that, and you care about these people that you put into this thing. And yeah, we're still trying to land the plane on it. So
I'll stop there. I'm satisfied. Pass the mic to Jamie, please. Jamie, I wonder what your answer to that question is.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, a lot of my work is research inspired. So really it's whatever I'm nerding out about and rabbit holing in. So for Handwritten, I've been doing like spring cleaning pretty much, and I live in Brooklyn. I was born and raised there. When I basically, like, my family's still there, my stuff hasn't moved around too much, so I was able to read all of these old diaries when I was cleaning, and like all these notebooks, like down to like random like homework assignments I really have too much stuff. So it was always kind of in the back of my mind, like, oh, this is weird that I like don't write the same way twice. And so I knew I wanted to do something with it, and I actually originally thought about it as a stage work. As I said, I'd done a lot of stage work. But no, I'm really glad it was a film in the end. I mean, it would have looked totally different. Like when I imagined the stage work, I thought I would have, you know, one of those like school, like mirrored projectors where you just like, put the slides on. So I was like,
The overhead.
yeah, the overhead, there we go. Yeah, the overhead projectors. And I was like, is this like a solo show or something? And then, so this would, and then, you know, it's a mixture of having that research-inspired piece and then the opportunity that comes. So for me, you know, when I saw this commission, this opportunity, I thought, okay, and let me try to make this topic that I want to dive more into, something that I can apply to this. So actually, in that Fantastic Worlds collection on Amazon Prime Video, it's the only doc. So yeah, the other ones are narrative, and we got to do whatever.
Awesome.
I won't speak too much on behalf of everything. I'll let Tommy have his word, but about 8 weeks into the ride is when the question came up where it's, what are we going to do with all this footage? And from that point, we started to film with more intent to actually create a documentary. And so we had to step back because we were so involved in this, and it really didn't feel like work, but it was a lot of work in the ride itself. And we had to step back and realize how beautiful this thing actually ended up being between the community that was built through this and the friendships that created from it. So we really were able to kind of step back and say, wow, this movie holds weight for us, and we feel like there's a really good message in here. And so that's where we got to really riffing with the idea of what to make of it. And then, of course, Tommy was going to be moving out of town, and so it was like, all right, we got to get this done in time. And then we need to get it done in time so we can send it to Will, so it's picture locked, and we're done putting anything in it. And so the deadline was there for us, and that was a nice thing to have because, like we've all been saying, you know, you can kind of keep going and going and going. So we knocked this film out in 4 months, the editing part, and it's unbelievable in my eyes that we did it that fast, but we were just so into it and dedicated and inspired, and we're calling each other like, hey, like, cut your plans tomorrow. Like, let's just go sit down for another 12 hours. And so that was a big drive for everything.
Go ahead, Mike. You got something to add?
Yeah, I mean, basically, that just the idea that we, became, so I guess for lack of better words, obsessed with putting time into it, and it was so fun to do, that it was great.
Questions from the audience? Yeah, dude, yeah, go ahead. You have good ones, so let's do it.
Obviously, everybody should enjoy the moment and everything, but my question being, do you have another project for where you're headed next?
Bro, they're too tired. Leave them alone. Just kidding. What's next, guys? Who wants the mic?
I produce a K-pop series that's coming out on Apple TV starting in the spring. I didn't know anything about K-pop, so that was like the appeal to it. So.
Awesome.
I'm kind of researching, I'm reading, I'm interested in climate change and fundamentalism and the rapture and the connection between the two.
That's cool.
So that film play I was talking about, this one that centers around spam, that one I'm doing community screenings and artist sort of workshops, chef collaboration. It's kind of this whole little universe, and I had developed that play over 4 years, and it kind of had its own life there. And then so the film is like a new iteration of that, the life of that project. So I am like doing basically scheduling bookings now for that. I also have a film in post-production called Color Theory. That one, I guess, is a hybrid doc of sorts, and that I shot that in LA. That one's with like human beings and not puppets. But yeah, that one's also.
How'd you like working with human beings?
Human beings, that was a tough shoot. That's like a different story. You can talk to me after, but it was a very extremely tough shoot. And yeah, so that one, it feels like a narrative film, but when the credits roll, you'll realize that the script is completely sourced with found quotes from real artists and architects throughout history who discuss color in Western art. And the way people talk about color is very loaded. So it's subtext for discussing race, but it happens in a fictional world, I guess.
I'm still currently working on the film that I've been working on for 5 years, and future films I'm just driven towards people who are unique in their own ways and are very passionate and driven and don't really care about what other people think, and they might seem to be outcasts and just kind of honed into their own worlds. And so I keep coming across these people and keep giving my time into new ideas. So I have to finish this 5-year project, but I have some other ones in the works that I'm working on as well.
I'm fortunate enough that I get to see a lot of different people's babies as they're making them. And I get to just come at the end and say, wow, this is pretty cool. So I just worked on a fun one about mixing milk and wine and having an out-of-body experience. And then I mixed another really cool one about a trans filmmaker made a psychological drama about her experience with gender dysphoria. So I don't know what's coming down the pipeline, but it's always really fun.
Yeah, so after we premiered the 18 Tuesdays, 2 days later I moved to LA, and so my band made an album before we went to LA, and we made an album when we got to LA. And so I documented the album, the trip, we drove cross country, and so the trip to LA, and then the album we made there. So I'm kind of putting that all together and making it into a story right now.
Very good. Any finals? Yeah?
I want to know about mixing wine and milk. What's that?
Do tell, Will. What does this mean to mix wine and milk?
The film was called Wilk, and it's very like Gen Z mishmash editing style. It was all shot on film, so it was very intentional. There's a really loud scene that involves diarrhea in the middle that my fiance really hated when I was mixing at our home studio. It's really hard to explain, and I don't think it needs to be explained. It was a ton of fun.
I'm not sure if that answers your question, but it was a good answer.
As an artist with, myself as an artist with a background in like device performance and experimental theater, and like all of your areas are very niche and very like how do you find collaborators and people that are interested in the things you're interested in, and people that are interested in like intaking that material, because there's always going to be somebody that isn't interested. And so how do you pick and choose and find those people?
I mean, for me, it boils down to like I really sort of don't like working with documentary people other than like editors, but like it's curiosity, And that's like across the board on anything. Is someone curious, and are they curious to figure out how things work? And then like the idea of like ego, like I don't like dealing with that and stuff, and people who are forceful with ideas because like they're often wrong. And so it's like that. Those are the ingredients for me. Is someone you can get along with, who can go with the flow, and could be just like a friend and hanging out. And if they're curious, like that's the building blocks for me for everything.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to work mostly by myself. The co-director on this is my wife, who's a novelist, a very good storyteller, and I worked her really hard. And other collaborators, you know, I live in a community of talented people. The composer lives one town over, and he's won a Grammy, an Emmy, a Peabody, great sound designer. In fact, my next door neighbor made a short doc that was nominated for an Oscar last year. So, I'm surrounded by really talented people, and I have to show them something that turns them on and get them to collaborate and not charge them too much money.
Yeah, so I actually studied visual art, so I'm kind of all over the place, and I really enjoy working in that multidisciplinary way and not really thinking too hard about, oh, I only want to work with, people strictly in this genre or film or like medium, and try to learn from all sorts of craft, really. And yeah, and I think working, like for instance, when I worked on my theater piece, I collaborated with fine artists too. Like went to an open studios and was like, whoa, you make really amazing like fabric, like textile work. Do you want to do some scenic design? Or looking at like a painter who also did animation, like digital animation, being like, do you want to make projection graphics? So, and then my composer, I've worked for like 10 years, was actually an improv jazz musician for a stage show I did way back in college. So, and his name is Matt Chilton. He did the score for this piece as well. And yeah, I think it's really when I'm looking for collaborators, I think it's, yeah, everyone's different and every project's different. You might work really well on one project, then realize, oh, maybe that wasn't the perfect fit for this other thing. And I think, as you were mentioning, just being very clear about boundaries and where, working within the limits of what is possible is super important. Just like clear communication with collaborators is very important.
Collaborating with people, I think it's very important to take criticism well and be able to communicate properly and not be bummed out when someone has a different idea for you. And so through life in general, you meet people that you just click with and you're like, wow, we don't have to argue, like we understand each other. And so coming across those people, you kind of just want to hold them tight. And with Will, I met him at a screening and we knew each other from the past and reconnected, and I realized that he was doing his work and we started working. Through the process, it's like it was so painless because he took the time to explain things to me, and there needs to be a movie made about people who do his work because it's like he's working the Matrix with his sound editing process. It's unbelievable. But when you meet them, you know that those are the people that you want to work with, and you kind of keep them close. And they come as you just get out and talk to people, I guess. I think that's the most important thing, is just kind of putting yourself out there and being a little bit vulnerable and explaining what it is that you're into and hoping that you meet someone that's kind of like-minded.
I promise I won't talk too long. Sorry, I'm talking too much. Thank you. I think you got to start with the snowball before it turns into an avalanche when it comes to, building a community of people that you collaborate with. And I think that starts with, anytime you watch or listen or read or see something that you appreciate or that, makes you feel good or makes you think, you can take the time and reach out to the person that made it. We live in a digital age, and you know, just telling people that you appreciate what they're doing or what they're doing is cool goes a long way. The best case scenario is they say, you know what, I've seen what you're working on too, and I would love to work together sometime. And the worst case scenario is you said something nice to somebody. And I think that goes a long way in this industry.
Thank you. I think I can speak for this audience here and say that, you know, the process of making a documentary film is a very long road. At the point at which you end up on a stage at a Q&A at a film festival represents somewhat of the end of the road. It's not the very end of the road, but it's part of the end of the road. And to finish a film is an achievement of itself, within itself, sorry. So thank you all for being here. Congratulations on that achievement, and thanks for your time this afternoon.